everything was segmented and modular, and it's one of the things that I wanted to join this meeting and discuss. Actually, I didn't understand the decision-making process, like when to use a class and when to use and when would a function or a method would be sufficient, because I'm not very familiar with like programming standards and stuff like that. But I kind of get that this modularity will be better for production environment. I think this is the purpose, but it was totally foreign for me, and I think this would be something that we as students would benefit from.
Yeah, that's actually one of those the issues that will always plague you, I suppose, because it's one of those core design decisions. And there are languages, they're entirely functional languages. I remember using Racket, but you have things like Lisp, and they're where everything is a function. Whatever you want to do, it's a function call. And there are other languages like Java, where everything is a class. Your entire program is itself a class. That's why the getting minimum viable program in Java is so long, because you have all that boilerplate code to write. Whereas Python, print hello world, that's your entire program. Generally, if I just need to script something out, I'm going to do mostly functions. But as soon as I have objects, for lack of a better term, then classes start coming into play, especially if I want to model data. If I find that I have a Python dictionary that's getting very large and I keep wanting to do things to process the data in it, well, that's now becoming what was recently introduced as a data class, which is just a special subset of a class with some nice data processing things around it. API views are best used as a class if you're writing a web API. Anything that represents, say, a button on screen is great for a class. But yeah, you might start off with something that I will do this just with functions, and then the complexity gets so high that you need to create a class with it. And kind of just getting a feel for how you would implement a program both ways is a nice learning experience. But that's just one thing that, like getting familiar with a language and its syntax, you just develop a feel for over time.
Yeah, I think using a class actually simplifies a lot of programs. Sometimes I start out, I think it's going to be really easy, so I just do the functions. And after I have about 5 functions and I have this shared data structure, I say, this should have been a class all along. I refactor it into a class with those become functions becoming methods, and it's actually easier to understand. If you do that more and more, you start to think in objects, then you approach the problem from the very beginning, seeing what classes can I extract from this. And sometimes that makes it, I think, actually a lot easier. At least it bundles the complexity up in one place.
And here's a secret: in Python, everything is a class. Okay. Even functions are technically classes under the hood.
I kind of agree with the point that it's easier to understand, but I also think it's harder to debug, because like once you found out that something needs to change, you need to make the changes in like in different ways over different classes. At least that was my experience. Whereas in functions, you just change. It's kind of centralized, or you got my idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that when you find you're doing the same types of calculations against the same data over and usually in more than one place in your code, that's a prime use case for a class. But in most cases, you can still do everything you need to with just functions. It's just a matter of, like like the button class earlier, if you create a button class that handles, here's what happens when I get clicked, and here's a function that, given where a mouse was clicked, was I clicked, and then from there you can go, I want a round button, I want a square button, I want, these different, and then you have a home button, which is a child of a round button, which is a child of, you end up writing less code overall. And the less code you have, the more maintainable it is. And usually, not always, the more clear it is.
Yeah, if you end up writing functions with a whole bunch of arguments or parameters, that's usually a good sign too, that that's really should be data shared within a class, because after about 3 parameters, it's extremely difficult to understand functions. It's very easy to get the arguments in the wrong order, and I think a class kind of cleans that up a lot in many cases, because you can have one non-global data structure or multiple non-global data structures that all the methods in the class can use without passing it around. So you get the generality you would have gotten if you had a function that took that as a parameter, but you don't have that added parameter.
Yeah, I think this is a very good point. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of see it like I've experienced it. Yeah.
There's another nicety that comes with implementing things as classes, data structures as classes, which is you can implement class methods using a decorator in Python. If you've ever done datetime.utcnow or datetime.now, those are class methods that are attached to or they're defined in the class definition, but they return an instance of itself. So you could have a function in the datetime module that returns, say just get now datetime, but is readable in the code to say, now equals datetime.now, and it just returns a new instance of, here's this datetime object representing when I called it. For work, I have a data structure that represents a request coming in from a service, and I have a class method on this request object that looks at the data structure coming in, this dictionary of data, and by identifying if certain components are in it, it can tell if it's coming from AWS or from Azure, and it then calls a different class method that it would be like doing a request dot from Azure, give it the data, and it returns a new an instantiated object that is of type request that was able to automatically parse the data coming in, and at least in this case, only keeps the data that I need to actually run my program. Otherwise, if you want to do it just functionally, you could have a function in a module that is read data from Azure. You give it the data and returns a dictionary. But if you have multiple functions that are returning the same formatted data that you need to use in your program, and you need to reference multiple times, that's a great use for a class, especially if you then go and want to make a subset or child class of this object. You don't need to rewrite all of those functions. The other thing you can do with class is instead of doing is instance dict, you can do is an instance of this exact my subclass here.
Okay. I'm still not sure I totally understand the class method thing. I saw that as well. It was implemented in the code I used, but I couldn't understand or distinguish the difference between it and just relying on the initialization function.
Okay. So I can share my screen. I love live coding, this kind of thing to show how things work. Let me share my screen here.
Michael.
Yeah.
Just before you begin, I posted an announcement on a post that I received a couple of days ago about Springer, the publisher, the book publisher Springer, and they're offering over 400 academic textbooks free for download. And you can have their Python books, data science books, I mean, all kinds of different areas, you know, that you can think of. And I already downloaded, you know, a couple of them. So, I mean, yeah, I posted in the meetup, but I can also post the link, the blog post, I can post it in the chat too.
Yeah, post in the chat here for everyone
Yeah.
who is here.
I mean, if you're looking for some reference, I mean, this is the opportunity because it's free.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, people can see the text editor here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's say we have a Python class here. Honestly, I love using treasure chest or that kind of thing. So we have a chest here, and it can have some items in it. And this whole bit right here is not required in Python. This is something called a type annotation, which is just, it's not used at runtime, but it's for readability and static type checking. Now, oh, that's a list of lists. Let's just say, yeah, it's just a list. Now, in Python, like you said, we have this init method. Self is just a reference to the particular instance of this class. And let's say this takes star args. We can just add as many things as we want into it. So we can do self.items equals args. And if I import this, do from demo import chest. Oh, am I not in? No, I'm not in the same thing. Bigger too. Too big. Okay. So I have a chest here, and I'm going to give it just some numbers, and then I can check out. We have a tuple of items. So technically this would be a tuple, but some whatever. Now, let's say that if I am given this list of items here, and I want to have a place in my code where this is a special chest. Let's say we're writing a game and we have a bonus chest. And the bonus chest, we can still give it args, but it takes everything inside of, it takes all the items and it doubles their value, let's say. So we can do self.items equals items to for I in args. This is just a list comprehension that's going to times every individual item in the list that we are given by 2. And the other thing I need to do to make this work is I need to add a class method decorator, and actually this self by convention gets changed to CLS. This self and CLS are not, oh, whoops, one more thing. I'm forgetting my syntax. Forget what you saw. I bet I would need to do, actually, I'm curious if that will work by itself. We can name self and CLS whatever we want to. They're not special. They're not keywords. It's just that is what the community has come together to say, when I see self, this is what I expect. You can even see that they are special highlighted in here for us because that's what the convention is. So this class method for bonus, instead of, well, I need to exit out first. Just like we did before, chest equals chest, and we give it a list of items. We could do special equals chest dot bonus. Notice that this is on, chest is on the actual definition of the class, not a particular instance of the class. And if we give this the same 1, 2, 3, 4, this should, yes. So if I go to special dot items, okay, I am gonna need to do that, never mind. Let's take this and do items equals that, and then we'll star arg this, that should work. So if I do that, and then special dot items, now we have everything we did before, but all of the values are doubled. So you would use a class method where you want to do some initial pre-processing or some kind of data fetching before you initialize the class itself. You can see that what we're doing here, this class method is still calling this initializer function. It's the same thing here. We're just pre-processing some data in front of it. I can give you an example from a library that I maintain where I can do this basic init that takes a state. Here I can do this update, and then here I has this report, and it has data inside of it that it parsed, but I got this from update. I have a special class method on this class where I can do m2 equals this. We have the class again, but I can do from report. I can give it this exact string, and we can even do m.data equals, I think this might work. Hey, it's the exact same data.
So I guess I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah. So I guess my question would be because doubling your input as the bonus class method does, I think could be the same thing could be achievable using a method.
It absolutely can. If we wanted to, instead of writing a class method there, we could just write a function. Let's just call it make bonus, where we're given some items, and I hadn't used this in here before, but it returns an initialized chest object. We can copy this down into here, and instead of CLS referencing it, we now have, we just initialize a chest doing the exact same thing. That will work. However, what if we have a class locked chest and it inherits from chest, and let's say that we have a Boolean value on here, which is true, or something like that. If we wanted to have special handling around this locked chest, we would either, well, by inheriting this down here, it also inherits this bonus method here. If we wanted to have a make bonus function that instead returned a locked chest, there are two ways that we could do that. Either this now has to take, chest class that we want to use to initialize it. So we're now giving it the class type that we want to initialize it, or some other kind of handling. But you'll notice that this make bonus now has the same syntax as our class method up here. Or if we don't want to do that, we would need to copy this function, and we would have to do make locked bonus and change this to a locked chest. So all of these are valid ways of doing the exact same thing. But if you want to go into testing for simplicity's sake, in this example, I would say that just having it here as a class method is going to be the simplest way of doing it. Now, that just works in this example. It's not going to work with every example. I'm not saying that classes or functions are best used by themselves. They're best used together. And whatever ends up being the clearest, concise, most readable way to get an action done, and most importantly, actually gets it done, because done is better than good. That's the best. That's the best way to do it.
So that's great, man. But let me ask you one more thing, if I can. What if we define another method within the class, but not a class method? It's just, and we can achieve the same thing. Like in case we created a new class like the locked chest, it will also inherit the same method. But I guess my question is, when would you decide to use a class method versus a normal method within the class?
So that is a great question, because normally you would worry about class methods after you learn about normal methods. The main distinction between the two is a class method is always going to return a new instance of this class, whereas a regular method on a class, a normal method, it's only ever going to have access to the data associated with an individual instance of an object. We could do the exact same thing here. We could create a bonus class by doing, let's just say, we'll do make bonus. That takes self as an argument, because every normal method on a class needs to, but then it doesn't take any arguments, because we are just going to reference the items that are already in the chest. So we can do this exact same thing down here. All we need to do is add self, references to self on it. And now, instead of having, instead of needing to call bonus, what we could do in this case, if I quit and reload, demo import chest, and I'm just going to say C equals chest of 1, 2, 3, 4. I can call C dot make bonus, and all of these items should now be doubled in value. And honestly, I could, instead of doing a replace like this, I could just do for item in items or something like that. Or it'd have to be an enumerate. Never mind. I can now call this multiple times, and it will just keep doing it. But you'll notice that if I make a new instance of a chest over here with less items, Oh, I just overwrote it. Terrible example. I can call C dot make bonus and C1's values dot items haven't changed, but C's items have. And now that we have this make bonus thing in here, one thing that we could do, which is totally valid, is instead of pre-processing our data in this class method, we could instead just do this. We could say chest equals the class with the items, and then chest dot make bonus, and then return the chest. That is a valid way of doing it as well. But if we find that we are, whoops, need to change this to args. If we find that we are initializing a chest and then calling make bonus on it multiple times, many times in the code, then maybe just doing new chest.bonus, it will save you tons of lines of code. And this is a simple example in order to get this across, but maybe you have like the the request method that I talked about before. I was doing a decent amount of pre-processing, data pre-processing in some of those class methods, and that's something I wouldn't want to have written out in multiple places. So again, there are many ways to solve this problem. It's whatever way you are comfortable with is the most readable and most importantly gets the job done. And you just get a feel for that over time. It's not like there's not a great flow chart for how to make the perfect, the perfect decision for every project, because every project is different.
That's really cool. Thanks.
So we can have time for more questions afterwards, and I would love to see some people's projects, but since I've vamped on long enough, I would love to introduce our speaker, our Q&A for the meeting today with Ari, who is going to be talking about connecting with recruiters and how to navigate the landscape. So I will stop sharing my screen here, and Ari can take it away.
Hey, thanks a lot, Michael. I appreciate it. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you tonight. One of the things that I really, let me just pull this up here, see if I can make that work. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yep.
Great. Let me just make sure I can see it. Sorry, guys. Let's see. Cool. So one of the, let me just do this over here. I have too many screens going on at once. Common issue, right?
Yeah.
Can everyone still see it? Great. So, oh, I'm sorry. Is it gone now?
No, I can still see it.
You can,
Yeah,
okay.
It's not.
It's just
We
not-
see your
it's not
webinar.
presentation mode, that's all.
Slideshow mode, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. That should be good now. Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you tonight. This is the first time I've given a virtual talk, but a lot of my talks have always been in person, so this is a new experience for me. I'm the Meetup event manager for JFrog, and so I sit in a lot of virtual meetups. But I got to say something. I really felt very comfortable in last month's meetup with all of you. I really like I like how the spirit of your community comes through even in a virtual setting. And started playing around a little bit with Python myself over the last couple of months. So I really wanted to just take a few minutes tonight and just kind of share a little bit about choosing a technical recruiter and really choosing the one that's worth your time. Sometimes recruiters get a bad rap. And by the way, sometimes they deserve a bad rap. And there's other times they could be a real benefit to your career. And being able to decipher what the best options for you are sometimes takes a little know-how. So looking forward to sharing with you a little bit about that tonight. Just a little bit again about me, the Meetup event manager for JFrog. Prior to this job, I was in the technical recruiting industry for the same company for 23 years, which in technical recruiting is ancient. I mean, usually, I'm not sure if you've worked, I'm sure many of you have worked with recruiters before. They're here for 3 months, they're there for 6 months. So 23 years with the same company is a very long time. I started out as a technical recruiter, not knowing anything about the business. I just thought I'd be helping people find jobs, and then eventually moved up into management, and then eventually the chief recruiting officer for an organization here in the Atlanta area. So it was a lot of fun, and that's kind of where I got my start in the community, doing meetups as well. But I'm a Python newbie, like I said, learning print statements, input. I was telling Michael that I kind of was interested in the UI portion of it. I successfully upgraded and installed Pi Simple GUI. And to me, that was a huge success just in doing that. So I'm going to learn a little bit of that. And also, I'm the father of many. This apparently is the most interesting fact about me. And that's the fact that I have 7 children. And as you know, my wife works a heck of a lot harder than I do. So I'm very excited to be here with you tonight. And I'm not doing bedtime tonight, which is great. If you want to follow me on Twitter, one of the things I like to tweet about is I love the evolution of software languages. It's one of the technology areas that always has excited me. So I like to bring up market-based information, language-based information, and things like that. So if you want to follow me at Ari Waller, that's great. And I can also be contacted at Ari Waller at rew@jfrog.com. So we're a proud sponsor of Orlando Python User Group. We every meeting, and I'll leave it up to Michael, we are auctioning off, or auctioning is the wrong word, raffling off a Circuit Express playground. I think we saw a demo of that. I saw how somebody used that for a motion detector last month. That was pretty awesome. But it's a lot of little circuit Python to have some fun with. So we'll figure out a way to give one of those away tonight. But at the same time, I wanted to also make you aware of just something community oriented. JFrog, and I'm not sure how many of you heard of JFrog. Many people know us more by our flagship product known as Artifactory. So in a DevOps environment, you may see that we are we're a binary repository, artifact repository that are used in all sizes of shops. We started out as an OSS product in 2006. I started a company in 2008. And even before DevOps was really called DevOps, we were developing tools for it. So we have end-to-end solutions in that. But one of the things we wanted to do to fight the COVID virus and take part in that battle is, if you or anyone in this group knows of any projects that are taking place where they need some enterprise class DevOps tools, you have access to that through JFrog. And there's our program is there. So if anyone may be potentially interested in it, take a snapshot of that and share it with them, because we would love to be able to take part in winning a battle, which obviously is affecting all of our lives. Want to spread a little bit of quarantine cheer. In the month of April, from all the meetups and conferences we go to, we're actually picking 3 winners for a Nintendo Switch. Now, if you've tried to acquire a Nintendo, that hasn't been the easiest task. Just you may have realized that already. The Nintendos have been sold out pretty much everywhere, and it's been a challenge even for me. I almost thought I couldn't fulfill my obligation for a few moments there, though I do have them all sitting in front of me right now. So you can join the raffle, and we'll be making we're making a raffle picks to give away 3 of these in the first week of May from those who have attended our meetups and seminars this month. So yeah, we're also giving away a copy of Animal Crossing, which also just went into high demand, and I'm lucky. I think I got all of those in-house too. I think Nintendo has said that they are not going to be giving any more of those out. So lucky to have gotten a hold of those. So anyway, more importantly though, if you want to look at tonight's slides and a video, which I'll post later of this talk, if you know anyone that could benefit from it, and also I'll have some talking point sources. So some of the things I say are going to be quoting some facts, and you can see where I got those facts, so you can look them up yourself if you'd like to. So I wanted to just comment really quickly before we talk into about picking a recruiter, a little bit about the job market. And this shouldn't be a surprise to many of you. I know some of you mentioned you are in school programs, and I know others are working as professional software engineers or have been doing it for a long time, that the unemployment rate before COVID, I want to emphasize that, in the month of February was 3.5%. Now that was exceptionally low. I think it went up to 4.4% in March, but it was in direct correlation, of course, to COVID-19. The last IT unemployment rate I was able to check on was in May 2019, and that was through CompTIA. If you take a look at that, they were able to establish a 1.3 unemployment rate, which is again exceptionally low, which is awesome news for all of you, because those who are either programming or looking to program, there's just a huge demand. And something, of course, related to COVID is it's certainly an opportunity and a position by which you can work remote in situations like this, and in many cases, not all, still maintain employment, which is, I consider myself lucky to have that opportunity with JFrog. As you can imagine, when this all happened, and I'm involved in meetups, it was a little scary at first, wondering how we were going to make some transitions with our events and programs. But again, software engineers and software developers have a great opportunity with that. So some other good news for you. The best jobs in US news, actually it should say 2020, I think I pulled the wrong slide, is actually, again, the software developer. And the way a US News and World Report selects this is based on a lot of factors. It's not just money. In fact, it's not the most lucrative position. If you want to be an anesthesiologist, they tend to make a lot more than software engineers. And they're also considered a fairly low stress job compared to many of the others, believe it or not. I mean, I guess they make people happy all day, right? Especially in the labor and delivery rooms. Most of this list that they put in the top 100 for US News and World Report are healthcare workers. But software development has gotten the #1 place for the last couple of years in terms of work-life balance, compensation, future prospects, and stress. Now, I'm not going to comment on that. Stress all depends on the environment that you work in. We all know that. But that being said, you have, whether you know it or not, if you're doing this professionally or want to do it professionally, what's considered the #1 job. Here's another quick fact for you about Orlando specifically. How many of you have heard of the CBRE? Do you want to show your hands real quick? Have you heard of it? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is a really interesting data. The CBRE is the largest real estate investment firm, I believe, in the world, and they provide also extensive research to organizations, let's say like a company like Amazon, if they're determining where to take their technology and open up another office, for example. They would consult a company like the CBRE to look at the tech score on a particular company, or excuse me, a particular city, so they can determine, hey, if I place a company here, is there future professionals to staff it here? What's the rents like? What's the university system like? All of these things are compiled together into a tech score. Now, the Tech 30, which is the top 30 cities in North America, Orlando is not one of those, and that may not be a shock to you for those who live in that general area. But the good news is that for the latest study, Orlando is in the top 10 up and coming. So if this was a top 40 list, Orlando would be there. And with a tech score, that seems to be growing. So for many of you who are from the area, you have the #1 job in a very up and coming technical economy. So a lot to be excited about. Any questions? Okay. So let's talk about Python. Now, again, maybe not be shocking to you, but it might be helpful to know where Python ranks and what the future of Python holds. Right now, according to the TIOBE Index, which it's the third most popular language on the TIOBE Index. And the good thing about that is the TIOBE Index, again, is not necessarily the best software language for, it's not considered the best. It's the most widely used on certain search engines based on the number of code that's out there, tutorials, and so forth. And if you go to TIOBE Index, you'll be able to see, and I have a URL on the bottom, which actually has a really awesome blog on medium.com that it's like a 23-minute to read blog. That's how much time it gave it to read it. And it actually has, but it takes a lot of compiled information about the top 10 programming languages. And Python was really, really core in that. So it's a secondary source, but you can certainly look at these sources. And I have in these cases to look at the primary sources on these rankings. It's the first ranked language on People, and this is specifically for tutorial searches. So where are new programmers and software engineers, what are they learning? And Python is number 1 on that list right now. It's considered the second most loved programming language on Stack Overflow. Anyone know the first? No. Rust, which is interesting because certainly Rust doesn't have quite have the following yet as Python. And actually, it has it's number 8 according to the Octoverse report. And so Python does have ability, is climbing the charts on that list very quickly. The second most popular language also for GitHub repositories. So needless to say, Python is not going anywhere. So I'm here to tell you how lucky you all are with all this great data about what you're passionate about. So what does this mean for Python developers? So that means that you have a mixed blessing. Technical recruiters are looking for you, and you're in their crosshairs, and that can be a really, really good thing, or that can be a really, really annoying thing, or it could be as bad as a telemarketer times 4 when the timing is not right. But again, if you let it be known that you may be open to something, or if you have a certain skill set, beware. So post if you dare. If you ever made that first step of making your experience maybe visible on LinkedIn, maybe you decided to update and beef up that profile, or maybe even post it on Dice, which is an all IT job board, or even hit some of these other job boards as you see here, Monster, Career Builder, The Ladders, some of these. You suddenly, for maybe a few minutes, you may not have realized it, but you probably were considered a rock star for a period of time. And as a result of this, you may have changed phone numbers, you may have switched email addresses because the volume just became very, very high. And that comes down to the problem of low unemployment in the IT space and a high demand for the skill set, especially with one of the most popular programming languages. So, when I started recruiting, it was primarily with phone calls. I remember I started recruiting in 1996 in Atlanta, right after the Olympics. I shared a computer with other people. I was faxing thermal paper resumes to my clients for consideration. And very, very quickly, right after that, we started getting into the modern job bank and the resume bank age. But now recruiters are not only all over LinkedIn. I'm sure anyone get contacted a lot on LinkedIn regarding their profiles? Yeah. What about with and then your emails? If they have your email address, that can get full up with a lot of spam very, very quickly. Your voicemail. If you ever posted your resume and check, it used to be you'd have to wait to get home to check your machine. But now your voicemail comes full very quickly. And of course, now you can't even escape the text messages in the age that we live. So no matter how you prefer to receive the information, the point is we have a lot of information coming at you. And sometimes that can be a little bit overwhelming. and difficult to manage. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is how to kind of make that leap into, really being in the driver's seat for what you want. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. So there are two types of technical recruiters I want to talk about. Actually, one of them a lot more than others. So just from a definition standpoint, corporate recruiters, they work directly for a hiring company. So so they're the ones that really represent one company, and they're reaching out to you for a job with their organization. Now, typically they're in an HR or a talent acquisition department, and there's a mixed bag there. Depending how a company treats talent acquisition in HR really can determine the quality of recruiter you're going to get on the corporate side. I know a lot of recruiters that do an exceptional job on the corporate side. So it's not that agency recruiters are better than corporate or vice versa, but for corporate recruiters, they're typically a salary employee and they're also, they usually have a salary with a possible bonus, but there's a different income potential typically in those kind of scenarios. The ones that probably fill up your emails and voicemails and text messages the most are agency recruiters, because they work for a staffing agency typically, and a staffing agency could be representing multiple companies. They may have one job in mind, but a lot of staffing companies can actually call one person and possibly submit your background to 4 or 5 companies who are looking for a Python engineer, which is not uncommon now to see because of the supply and demand. Typically, there's a salary plus commission, and sometimes these can be 100% commission too. So there is a huge incentive on the agency side. Not that there's not on the corporate side, but there's a huge incentive to really reach out to candidates. And sometimes that is not always done with the finesse that we would like, or frankly, with the faith that builds the faith that we would like to have in somebody that's a professional partner to us. But I could attest to the fact that there are good recruiters out there, as well as people that aren't quite as experienced yet. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt to be of best service to you. So how do you use your time wisely to choose what's best for your career is really the emphasis. So before we get to do that, let's talk about some of the drawbacks to using a recruiting agency. First of all, some of you may say, well, I don't think I need to use a recruiter at all. My network in the Python community has always been my most valuable resource. Well, then I agree with you 100%. As I said this when I was a recruiter, and I'll say it again as looking back, is that the fact that everyone's here tonight rather than doing something else and binging on some of the great shows that are on right now means that you're passionate about what you do. And this is the network that you're building that frankly you would get your best referral network for. So what you guys are doing and gals are doing together tonight is definitely the best thing, frankly, as far as I'm concerned. So you're right. You may not ever need a technical recruiter from an agency ever. So keep your profile a secret, and you should be in good shape and have very little noise in your life. Also, if you have too many recruiters calling you about the same job, that is definitely a very common problem. You probably have experienced that, especially when a new job comes out to a big company in your area. Let's say Disney is looking for a Python developer, and the job hits a vendor management system, and suddenly 20, 30, 50 recruiters suddenly get it. And you may get back-to-back phone calls all about the same job, and you already know that it's a project for Disney, right? So that can definitely create some noise. Also, potential double submissions of your resume. When you work with an agency, sometimes your resume may be pulled off the internet or sent to the same company twice, and that can cause some headaches that you don't need to have. Sometimes people feel like all they care about is my skills, and that's right. That's pretty much all they care about. It's usually not that relationship building component to it in some cases, because it's a very fast transaction. And depending on the level of recruiter you're working with, you may very much feel like you're just an object towards their end. And that's really no way for any professional to feel. So that's something that could be a drawback. And the fact that they don't get what you do, you feel like you're explaining, they'll call you about a Java job when you're clearly a Python developer, or they'll ask you about a systems administration job, which could be a little trickier to take on a resume just with the whole DevOps scene, right? Some people can have a good amount of experience with both, but still, if they don't get what you do, how are they really going to benefit your career? But then you have your pros. A lot of recruiting agencies have direct relationships with the managers, especially on contract positions. So if you like consulting engagements and you're not looking for something full-time, many times a hiring manager will pick a recruiter and just love working with them. And that is something that that relationship building is what, frankly, many staffing agencies, they pay a lot of money every single year to their staff to build these relationships so that it doesn't hit HR's desk, that so that we can work exclusively with a hiring manager. That's a benefit to you because you may not hear about the position from anywhere else. That's the next point, exclusive job opportunities that may not be available. If my agency is selected to fill this job, you may never hear about that. So if you don't work with a recruiter, you may not know about it. You still have other opportunities, but maybe not one that could be the right one for you. If you are a match for a job, they're motivated to get you the offer. The more money you make, frankly, the more money the recruiter makes. Usually a lot of people feel that recruiters are trying to nickel and dime on the compensation. I'll tell you the majority of the time, especially the way it's set up now, the more money you make, the more money the agency makes. So they really are typically on the same team as you to make that. Also, recruiters sometimes have a really good understanding of the local market and can focus on that skill set. And that's important because finding somebody that can really be, your passion is coding. Most people's passion is not looking for a job. And if you have somebody that can guide you through those hurdles and give you some advice, especially if you build a relationship where they can be like a sounding board, whether they have a job for you or not, is huge because they can kind of give you some updates on what the market looks like and make sure that you're really headed in the right direction. Okay, like what's the most popular framework that people are working with in Python today, or what's the most popular databases that people are working with and getting their hands on. Those are the kinds of things that might be helpful when you hear from a recruiter's perspective on the demands from their clients. Also, confidentiality and partnership. If you want to do things confidentially, the recruiter will keep that for you. So there is some benefit as well. So you have to weigh what the value of those items are to determine if it's worth your time. Frankly, if you can do a lot of this on your own, I think that's a great option too. But sometimes feeling out what's there to make sure you make the best choice professionally is huge. So I'm going to go into about 5 tips here on selecting the best recruiters to work with. Okay, best recruiters to work means work with. I should fix that. So here is one of the best recruiters, and this is almost seems like duh, but sometimes we really forget to ask our colleagues, hey, which recruiter have you had the most success in placing you in the past? Which recruiter has been the most educated in your field to be a good coach as well as counselor related to the market? Is there somebody that you can recommend to me? And the other thing that's important to know about that is, recruiters have a reputation. The worst thing a technical recruiter can do, and most recruiters don't realize this till it's too late, is they don't close the loop with the candidate that they're working with. It's the biggest complaint. You probably have had it happen to you where you've been submitted to a job and you never heard back from the recruiter. Well, that's just very short-sighted and silly and unprofessional. But one thing that is when somebody refers you to them and their name is on the line, you probably will get put in the top of the pile just because you're a referral. And referrals are typically the most successful placements. So keep in mind that if you get referred, that can be a huge benefit for you and also for the quality of recruiter that you get. Screening the emails and voicemails. Now, this is the most boring part. There's most of the emails that you probably get are generic, and they say, I've got the best job for you. And it's like, we are looking for 2+ years of Python with 3+ years of this and 4+ years of that, and Angular and React and Vue, which of course we know they wouldn't need all 3, and everything associated with the job. you're going to get a lot of that. And that's just noise. And frankly, in many cases like that, you're probably looking at the quality of individual behind the sending of that email in terms of how they brought this information to your attention. Typically, a lot of times you can probably delete those unless, if you're getting too many of them, putting those generic ones away because it may be something you decide to do. But look for the people that have spent a little bit of time trying to research you as an individual. Recruiters have all the tools in the world to know everything about you. It's scary, but there are tools out there that can take your social profiles, combine it with your resume, combine it with everything, and it paints a whole picture of the last tweet you made, which social networks you're part of, and also how in-depth your code is. They can look at your most recent repository update in GitHub. These are the things that are important to the profile of what recruiters are looking for. And if there's an indication that somebody spent time researching your background, it might not be a waste of time to at least have a conversation. Make sense? Now, the same with phone calls. Phone calls can be, if the phone calls are probably all sound the same. Hi, my name is Ari. I'm calling from ABC Company. I have a great opportunity for you. Hey, get back to me. The chances of you returning my phone call are pretty slim. But if I know where you live and I can attest to the fact that this job is a couple miles from your house and point out some of the great benefits, including their amazing pension plan and how the last Python developer that you placed there has been there for 3 years and he's very happy, that may be an indication that you may want to call that person back because they have some in-depth knowledge of what they're talking about and how it can possibly benefit you. So it's a good way to screen out and get rid of the chaff and try to focus on potentially a good situation for you. So this one is turning the tables a little bit. Recruiters tend to call and they want to get right down to business and ask you a whole bunch of personal questions. And a lot of times it's like rapid fire, right? They're throwing a question here. They want to, how much you make and when was your last raise and all of these personal questions. Well, I highly recommend that you qualify the individual that you're working with. If you've already screened it a little bit, you ask them some questions to make sure that they have the capability of actually doing something successful for you. And based on their answers, you can determine whether it's a good use of your time. For example, how many Python engineers have you placed in the last couple of years? Now, they may say 0, but don't listen so much to whether they placed 0 or placed 5. Listen to how they respond to the answer, because if they are actually engaged in what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, they can be a very, very effective recruiter. If they say, I've never placed a Python developer, but I've been going to the Orlando Python group for the last 6 months, trying to learn as much about the field so I can be a good resource, that's probably a good indicator that they're fully engaged and they want to be successful for you. Also, how many placements have they made with the company that they want to present you to? Have them describe the relationship that their organization has. Is there any benefit to going through them? They may not give you their client right away, but are they just kind of submitting a resume and saying a quick prayer and hopefully you'll get an interview? Or do they have a track record with the client so they can actually be a value add for you? Does your company have a relationship with the hiring manager? That's something we talked about before. Have them explain why they think you're a good match and see why they called, why did you call me? Why do you think I'm a great match for this role? What benefit would it be for me? What can you tell me about the software engineering job in Orlando? Just some interview questions to determine, is this person I'm speaking to a good use of my time? Because looking for a job is an investment, and you can't be, and you don't want to take all the hard work you put into your career and just start being scattered out there like a handful of seeds in all of these places. You want to be able to be targeted to make sure that you have the skill set, an in-demand skill set in the number one job in a software language that is very highly desirable. You get to chart your course. Make sure you take advantage of that. And also the tools that you use, a recruiter is one of those. And building that relationship can be really helpful. Here's another one. This is just something, LinkedIn recommendations. I put one of mine up there. I actually did some, I've been doing this for 20 years. I put like way too many out there. But I want people to look at different scenarios from clients and candidates that I placed and what their stories were. This actually happens to be somebody I've placed 5 times in the course of that time. So 20 years, it can happen. But look at the recruiter's LinkedIn profile. Do they have any recommendations? Do other people have good experiences working with them? That's something to consider too. It's not the end all if they don't, but at the same time, if you see some quality references out there, that can be a good indicator. And here's where it comes. Here's where the rubber meets the road. It's when you can break the ice and build that and have that trust. So once you've done your due diligence in screening a technical recruiter and seeing what they have, then you can break the ice and really be upfront with them about what you're looking for. Because really, the only way a recruiter is going to be doing a good job for you is if you can have some level of transparency in terms of what your career motivation is. If a recruiter doesn't understand what's motivating you to either look for a position or even passively look for a position, it's not a good use of your time, and it's not a good use of their time, and it's not a good use of the manager's time that you make the time to interview with, unless you kind of really make sure that you're using everyone's time wisely. So really breaking the ice, having that conversation, making sure that they know, the recruiter especially, that you're not going to go approach their client on your own, so they can be transparent with you. While at the same time, they're keeping your confidentiality in terms of your job search. And honestly, that's just a quick rundown about some things that I learned. I want to see if there's any questions from anybody. If I can't say I have all the answers, but at the same time, I've done it for a while, and if I don't know something, I'll be happy to find that for you. But do we have any questions from anybody in terms of whether it's something I even mentioned, or frankly, just an experience that you had that you'd like some guidance on or an opinion on? I'd be happy to share that.
Hey, I'm Alexander, by the way.
Hi.
I'm new to the group. I kind of heard your presentation. I came in about 30 minutes late. I was at the hospital. I'm actually a nurse, and I work as a clinical data analyst for Advent.
Okay.
Python was kind of, I guess, the second language I learned programming. I did some stuff with Microsoft Access back when I was in the Navy for a bit.
Okay.
And now most of my projects are developing some automation for the hospital's analysts. I'm working with some neural network projects and working on real-time dashboards and using Python to pull some data from SAP business objects, dumping them into our own data lake through a SQL server, and creating some fun AIs for that. But I pretty much heard a lot about full-time developers, and when I was looking online, I'd like to get some sort of consulting jobs on the side just so I could keep sharpening my skills and be exposed to different industries, because right now I'm kind of like a unicorn. I'm really a healthcare professional, but I have this skill set. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is most of the jobs that I've looked for that deviate from healthcare usually require different languages that I have not been exposed to, like you were talking about, like Rust and all this fun stuff. I mean, I know SQL. SQL is a joke, and obviously Python and some other intermediate SAP business objects, blah blah blah. But I'm not like full blown developer like some of you guys might be, like a computer science major or whatnot. So I guess what advice would you have for someone that's not, let's say, a full-blown developer, mostly an analyst? I work with data and numbers. My skills in programming are pretty sharp. I guess that's pretty much what I do full-time, essentially, just build AI and neural networks. But I'm more of a statistician for healthcare. How can I segment my way into other careers so I could grab those skills and bring them back to the hospital?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, you have you're a unicorn, but actually a more common unicorn these days, especially with the benefit that you're giving the healthcare industry. It's much easier to teach somebody. Healthcare companies tend to want to teach people the development side of things, because the healthcare understanding is sometimes so difficult to catch on to that they'll give a lot of people their a chance to really do a lot of development. So it sounds like you've really gotten a good mix of skills from that in the military. So I would one of the things that you can do is you can feel free to put yourself out there as doing some freelance work to get the side projects that you're looking for, because you're not looking to make any. It doesn't sound like you're looking to make a complete shift to a new job or a new company. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So I just got accepted into the Master of Science in Data Analysis at UCF.
Awesome.
And what I really want to do is kind of dip my my toes into different waters, so I could expand my knowledge and in programming and developing, and really understanding how other industries are working with their data. As you know, healthcare has very restrictive data, so not a lot of outsiders get access due to the privacy laws. And also the way that we access our information. There's so much information, so massive. So what I try to describe as real time for us may not be what is described as real time in other industries.
Sure.
And it's very hard to even access or tap into the data servers of Cerner. So for example, now what I do is I run my own server. The hospital runs a server for me, but it's just for me to use for that. I have a service account. And then I have a SQL server. So then what I do is I pull reports from SAP Business Objects, which saved into a network drive. Then my Python scripts grab those data points that are saved into the network drive at certain intervals, does the fun magic through it, and deposits the solid data that I want into my SQL server. And then I could develop some front ends, with either Power BI or, even sometimes Access, because it's kind of so easy to slap something together. And then that's how I can, display some of the analysis that we're doing on the front end side. So then those things have challenges, because depending on how many reports I'm pulling out of SAP Business Objects, like for example, if one of my reports takes 5 minutes, because I'm pulling let's say 5 million records, what ends up happening is you understand that the entire system is pulling reports out of SAP Business Objects. So if I'm taking 5 minutes out of the queue in that particular server, I'm practically consuming 15% of the entire hour. So that's just the tip of the iceberg, because as my projects keep growing, I keep pulling in different segments, and the more data that I'm pulling in, the more I'm consuming from the entire institution. But then again, I'm automating programs that are wiping out departments that usually take someone. It's a full-time job for someone to just play with Excel, copy paste, and do some analysis. While now my Python scripts can run that in 15 seconds or something crazy like that.
Okay.
So by the end of the year, we're looking to save $500,000. But then again, the bigger the projects become, the harder they are to implement, because every time that I pull these large data sets, it's really shooting in the foot a lot of the other data analysts that are trying to pull that data from the server. And if they get priority over my reports, then all of my data is pretty much delayed, and then it kind of screws up the whole system. So yeah, I'm just curious to see how other industries are working around those issues with near real-time data access, and how I can implement that in my industry.
Okay. Well, as far as the specific that specific use case, maybe there's some other people that can, that may be able to speak a little bit more to that. But as it relates to gaining some experience by using what you have, what you just described in terms of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, how you present that in some form, I don't want to, in a resume-like form, and making yourself available for part-time work, and making it known that that's what you're looking for more freelance-oriented experience. I think that's where you're going to get your most experience. If you don't have your own GitHub for some of the things that you do that is not proprietary, getting that together. In fact, it's getting to a point now. It used to be that graphic designers had to have that URL under their name. I never read a graphic designer's resume in my life, because all I need to know is one thing. What does that link say? Because that link is going to show their work. Now, developers are not there yet, but I'll tell you that a lot of companies tell the recruiters that work with them, hey, if they don't have a GitHub repository that they can show us, I'm not sure. Those aren't my first choice candidates. And it's not just because of this concept of people going home and working in coding because they love it so much, but it's also they can take a look at your coding style and determine whether you're a good match for their environment or not. So maybe putting something like that together for yourself and portraying it in that fashion would be able to benefit for that. I hope that's helpful, but that's going to be something that's that could be helpful for you. Anybody else have any? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alexander.
I was just wondering if I could do a follow-up question to that. If I were to make a repository, how would it look? Because I mean, all the code is essentially I made it, but I made it under the company that I'm working for. So I'm assuming that the company that I work for would want to claim ownership over all that code. So if I put it into a repository, would that cause any sort of issues, me sharing the code that our analytics team is using? I don't know how that would work out.
Yeah, you'd get in big trouble. Don't do it. Yeah, and anything that's proprietary. Michael, did you want to comment on that, or somebody else wanted to comment on that?
Well, yeah. Do not copy any proprietary code into a personal repository. If your company is using GitHub is using either the public GitHub, you may be able to connect some of those commits with your personal account, but you definitely should not be making public any code that should not be made public. That is a recipe for getting sued and definitely losing your job at a minimum. That's where things like LinkedIn come in, because you can at least you can say the things that you've worked on, what you're allowed to say that you've worked on, without showing the code. Unfortunately, if you want a good GitHub profile, that you should have some stuff on there that shows your general style of how you code. It doesn't have to have everything you've worked on. I know some people are insane about keeping their streak alive, to the point where I've both heard and seen people who have automated scripts running on their behalf that run a code formatting tool against some obscure repository, make a PR, and that counts for their thing for the day. Don't be that person. But having something for people to look at, even if it's not thorough, just have some idea. And honestly, the best thing to do is, if you are working on something in your free time, have it on GitHub. Even if it's small and just for you, have it there, because it is something for people to look at.
Yep. Absolutely. Any other questions? Anybody else? Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Is a recruiter actually good for finding an entry-level job?
So let me tell you the issue with that. And there is an issue with it. It's because in most cases, a recruiter is companies pay a lot of money for full-time placement recruiters, meaning that 20% typically of your first year salary is what the agency is getting on behalf of placing you. So there's no fee. In fact, you should never pay a recruiter to find you a job. I hope no one's done that. It's like definitely a no-no. But the problem is that typically most companies want somebody with at least 2 years experience, with the supply and demand that sometimes has come down to at least 1 year of experience. But I'll tell you what's been very successful for people who wanted to go into this, and I keep coming back to GitHub because it's probably maybe you get to a point where that's overused for what it is, but I've taken people with just a GitHub repository of their skills and have been able to place them because somebody in their schooling can show that they have enough experience that they are as good or better in some cases to somebody with maybe a couple of years of industry experience, depending on their coding abilities. So, if you present yourself right and you can show your skills and your project work in the format of a resume and through your LinkedIn profile and possibly a GitHub repository, a recruiter can help you, but you have to really tool them to do that, because most of the times recruiters, if they don't make a placement in an agency, they lose their job after a certain amount of time. So there is a little bit of survival and also making sure that they're giving the clients what they want. But if you can present yourself as somebody that their client would want based on your experience, then I don't think your actual work experience matters, because your portfolio and your profile will best support you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is another great reason to have some schoolwork. If you're just getting into it, if you're just learning how to code, put anything that you've written on GitHub, because then if you don't have any job experience, if you can show that you've at least been actively coding and working on your skills, a lot of places will consider that part, towards that minimum proficiency skill, which years of experience are supposed to approximate.
Yeah, and one of the things that's a great point, Michael. And one of the things I want to mention is if you go to the page where the raffle and everything is, I have a link on there for the blog that I mentioned to you before. And one of the interesting things about Python specifically is that Python, for the amount of years of experience and the income you can earn, is higher than other programming languages in most cases. So, for example, if you're a Java developers are very high in demand. There's no question about it. There's huge demand for it. But somebody with 2 years of Java experience versus somebody that has 2 years of Python experience, I mean, Python can definitely have a higher income capability because of that demand too. So it's Python, the number of years isn't as important as your ability to code, and the ability to assess that, and what kind of style you're using to code. All of those things matter.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing mostly out there in terms of how Python applies it? Automation? Is it web apps? Are they what are you seeing out there?
Yes, yes, and yes. And to the one you didn't ask about, Python is especially it's I was unfortunate. I say gives my age a little bit. I mean, I was recruiting when Perl was the most popular thing. It used to be HTML and CGI with Perl back in the day. But really, Python is, I guess, the grandchild of Perl, really, in terms of being a multi-purpose language that can be used in almost any environment. So the web application development, yes. Data science, yes. I hear a lot of people talking about R. But one of the things, Python is much more widely used than R. So as tools are being created, I'm not saying R is not going to be relevant. There's always data science tools coming out, but Python has really dominated in that space as well. So automation, web applications, DevOps from an automation standpoint. Really, that's one of the reasons why it's such a in-demand language, is because it can do so many things. And the number of career paths you can take with Python, honestly, are probably more plentiful than many of the other software languages that are out there today.
I think Python may. Good.
Oh, go ahead.
I think Python may sneak into the embedded space at some point too. So I see inklings of that. So that might also be another avenue that's going to be up and coming.
Yeah, absolutely. The Circuit Expresses, as you know, the IoT. Absolutely, it's becoming a lot. In fact, a lot of people are starting to get their start there, just because they're small and so much fun to use.
And even in web front end, there are a couple projects that are trying to make Python work with WebAssembly.
Oh, okay, cool.
We
Awesome.
have 2 questions in the chat.
Okay.
So what are recruiters looking for in student GitHub profiles? And I think maybe to expand that question out a little more, what are recruiters looking for with someone who is about to or recently graduated from school or some other kind of program?
Yeah, they're looking for, honestly, a clear, concise approach to how you're presenting your skill set. One of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to embellish your background. And it's tempting. It's not that not that anyone's trying to lie, but it's tempting because you're looking at these job descriptions that have that are asking for you to have 11 skills with everything. And most of the time, they're not really looking for that. I mean, there are some jobs you just won't get. But one of the things that you want to do is look at what you're targeting. And you want to build the right networks in the right places, like coming out to a meeting like this. This is an awesome way to do that. but it really comes down to the ability to present your coding. Now, there's other things you can do too. You know, there's assessments that you can take. I'm not interested in people running out and getting certifications and paying a lot of money for things before they have industry experience in most cases. But if you ever have an opportunity to take maybe a standardized Python test to see how you rank and how you rank from a percentage standpoint, many recruiting agencies will let you use that and possibly ask for the results. You could use that as a tool to kind of show you, hey, how can I improve my skills to get in the door? But I think, you know, we've talked about really talking about the getting into taking your GitHub, but using just really showing your coding experience and your coding style, and make sure it's yours and make sure it's, you know, what you're learning. They're not looking for volume, though I must say that if your last contribution was 1.5 years or 2 years ago and you're looking for a job, that's almost counterproductive because people are looking for what you've done more recently. You want to be able to put what you're currently most interested in. Are you taking part in any open source projects with others? Those are the kinds of things, honestly, your passion is what they're looking for, because a lot of people wanted to enter the software development industry because of the money. I can say that's fine, but if you're really not passionate about it, you know, you work so much during the day that if you don't love what you do, you really should find something that you love to do, because I think the money component of it, while that's a great part of any job, it's got to be something that you love to do, and that's going to come across in your project work. Does that answer your question out, Cynthia? Yep. Okay. Also for Robert,
I'm sorry, can I add something to that?
Yeah, please,
question?
Minna. Thank you.
Yeah. So can you just elaborate on what would be a good way on showing off a GitHub profile, and whether repo names have anything to do with a good GitHub profile? Like, so I have a few projects, but they are named after the schoolwork. So it's a data mining final project. It's would the change in the name be productive in any way? And how can I show off the profile? Like, how can I market it in a sort of way?
So I'm going to let somebody else address this, but what I will say is how you know, remember, you want your GitHub profile to be, you know, what's one of the most important things you learn about coding? It's readability, right? You know, it's a good practice to document what you're doing. So the more information, or the most concise information you can speak about, and also list your projects from more complex to least complex. That's always helpful. So you can get the stuff that you want people to see first. Something you did 4 years ago, if it's not your most current work, shouldn't be what's showcased. So you want to show people what you've done more recently and be able to give them an explanation about what it is. But in terms of the ins and outs of actually setting that up correctly, I think other people here who have a GitHub could probably speak better to that.
I think what you put in the read.markdown is important too. If it just says some stuff I did in school, period, one line, that's because people are going to look, if they browse your repository because they're thinking of hiring you, they are going to look at some of your code. They're going to look at the doc first. They're going to look at the read.md that comes up. And if it gives a reasonably succinct explanation of what your program did, or your approach, or why you did it, that's going to motivate them maybe to go and actually look at the examples or drill down through the code. If it looks like it's just some stuff you threw up there because you didn't take time to do hardly anything in the doc, that's gonna hold you back.
Agreed. You should definitely have a fleshed out README. Any folder can have a README, and it will automatically pop up when you're viewing that folder in GitHub. I would also add that while the name of the repository should obviously be somewhat descriptive, make sure you fill in the description in the GitHub repo itself, because anywhere where that repo is embedded, that pops up and will be displayed alongside, you know, stars, number of forks, what the primary code base is in that repository. If you're doing things with hardware, if you're doing anything or you want to provide a demo, a link out to a YouTube video is great to show how something works. Having videos if you're doing things, or having pictures embedded in the README if you're using hardware, or on a command line is also really great. I'd say at a bare minimum, you want to say, here's exactly what this does. and here's the easiest way to get set up with it and how to run the most basic version of it. Because, and I love preaching this, anytime you write documentation, it's not for anyone else, it's for yourself in 6 months when you forget how it works.
Yeah, exactly. You know, one of the things that it's not exactly programming, but so being a technical recruiter for all those years, you're with not only if you do something for too many years, but if you're with the same company for too many years, the stigma that could possibly come from that sometimes, it's kind of scary. But about 8 years ago, the reason I was able to get my job is because I really was disgruntled about the fact that every time I let someone in the community know that I was a recruiter, all the defenses started coming up because of like, oh no, a recruiter, and it really concerned me that and I wanted to see if there was a way to bridge the gap between the meetup community and also providing some open source recruiting insight to technology professionals to kind of bridge that gap. And I had no experience in meetups whatsoever. So what I started doing was I started having to build a portfolio. I'd go out and speak at meetups. Even though speaking at meetups is not my job right now, I have to understand the level of sensitivity associated with working with meetups and corporate product pitches and being protective of the community. All of those concepts that I was able to glean and put together helped me get to a role in where I'm pushing that through right now, which is great. But I had no experience in those areas. It happened to be something I had to work on, building a portfolio, so I could do what I love, which is hang out with developers and learn about what's going on with technology, and at the same time be able to provide value to an organization to do that. Taking a similar approach from a programming standpoint, again, it's putting it together. It's communicating what you've done. I love the YouTube idea. How about speaking at a meetup? I mean, what a great opportunity for some of the things that, some of the really cool projects that you're working on, going to a meetup. And if you build a portfolio of talks that you're giving, someone looks at your background and they say, wow, this person is junior, but they've given 3 talks to the Python user group. Let me look at the video. And then suddenly you have the hiring manager's attention of sharing your passion for what you do, something you will never see on a resume. That's huge. So again, it's really inventing who you are based on the passion that you have.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I got a question. So my background's in mechanical engineering. I'm currently getting my master's in data analytics to get a role as a data scientist or a data analyst.
Awesome.
Also, thank you for your talk. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So my question is I kind of feel a little bit like a fish out of water, not too sure what people want to see on my resume, things like that. And I'm wondering, it sounds like you want the recruiters to come to you. Like, I feel like I'd really benefit from a recruiter's advice in terms of what they want to see on my resume. So how can I kind of reverse the tide?
So reversing the tide on that is one of the hard parts is, again, thinking most recruiters, first of all, if you have recruiters that are in, especially in your local area, that ever do come out to the meetups. And by the way, I'm happy to give any advice that I can. I'm not in the local Orlando area. I don't know all the companies in your area that are doing all the hiring, but ones that come out to the area, they can they're coming out to the meetup to not only be part of it, and if you ever need a job, to maybe come to them, but they're also willing to give of their time in most cases too, and they can kind of share a little bit about that. But one of the things I love is when somebody has experience in another industry, like the engineering industry, think of use cases that you can apply your expertise in, because you have a core-based knowledge in mechanical engineering that other people don't have. And there are opportunities that come up where your knowledge in that space actually puts you ahead of others because you have that core knowledge. Very similar to the healthcare background, actually, but not as widely known. So trying to build and think of use cases, especially when building your GitHub portfolio or something of that sort with your mechanical engineering background, that's what they want to see. It's not so much what they want to see. It's almost like what can you do and how can you launch off of what you've already taken the time to build? Because you have some industry experience that's unique. And that's how you can make yourself that unicorn, and at the same time be able to present your expertise, not just from what you're learning in coding, but also from an industry perspective. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that question, because
Sure.
I have a very similar question. I recently made my LinkedIn profile.
Awesome.
My background is actually in astrophysics. I'll be finishing my PhD next month, but I'm looking to get out of academia afterwards and apply my skills to a data science career.
Awesome.
So throughout my PhD, I've used Python for all of my data analysis and statistical modeling and things like that. And then I made my LinkedIn profile, and everyone's telling me, oh, the recruiters will contact you, but that hasn't happened. And so I'm not really sure what to do right now, or how to convey to recruiters or potential hiring managers that my background in astrophysics is applicable to data science.
Yeah, there's definitely some challenges there. First of all, when did you start updating this? Was this recently, or is this over the course of the last year?
I made my LinkedIn profile in January.
Okay, you're coming into a pretty rough time in terms of what the market's like. I don't envy anybody right now, even people who are skilled, frankly, in the COVID market right now. It's definitely tougher, and I really do believe we will come out of this. I believe because it's isolated into one issue, I do think that we're going to bounce back pretty well. I just don't know the timing of that, because my crystal ball happens to be in the shop today. But Allison, I think that first of all, your background is very desirable. Somebody with a background in astrophysics that wants to primarily focus in data science, I really do believe that when you start applying for junior data analyst roles, that you are going to get you're going to get the opportunity to do that in a market that's going to be more that's ready to do some more hiring, and it will put you in advantage. The fact is, you're extremely well educated. You've used the background that you've used the programming skills in that framework. So again, it doesn't take away from communicating. LinkedIn is one part of it. A lot of people make a mistake and think if they have a LinkedIn, they don't need a resume. They really are two different pieces, two different documents. One's a social profile, and one, of course, is a more maybe a more professional profile. And it's really important, by the way, everybody, that they need to line up. I've had hiring managers do some interesting things, like look at the LinkedIn profile, and if it doesn't look like your resume, they want to reject it. It's like the person's working all the time. They don't have time they're not worried about what their LinkedIn profile looks like. Here's their resume. It's just part of the equation. But you putting together a resume, and make sure that you enhance the kind of projects that you've done. When I say enhance, or maybe that's the wrong word, bring out your project work and outline some of the coding that you've been doing and the projects that you've worked on in your program. It's acceptable to do that, even if it's not professional work experience, and show it as a project section. And it can show but mostly important, show what you did. A lot of people want to put it in the form of a team and what everyone else did, but in resume, it's what Allison contributed, it's what Allison analyzed, it's what Allison coded. All of those things are really what's going to be most important to you. But you're right. It's not right now. I mean, sometimes, especially for certain levels right now, people maybe not flocking like they were to LinkedIn. But I think that's going to change, and I think you're going to have an excellent opportunity to be really successful in what you want to do based on your background.
Thank you. One more question. As someone who, it's been unclear to me for my level of education, but also not quite an education in, say, computer science. Or it was unclear to me what level of job I should be applying for. I feel like I'm a little bit overqualified for maybe entry level, but I certainly don't meet the qualifications for a mid-level job.
Yeah. You know, I think that when you think about the level, you have to ask yourself what you're really asking about. Are you talking about income? Because if it's income to target, because honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Getting your first step into a company to be in the position that you want to be, whether they call it junior, whether they call it mid-level, get the experience that you want with a good company and a good opportunity, and build your career from there. Now, if it's income-based and you have a set amount of money that you're requiring, that changes things a little bit, because a lot of times, if you want, you know, a certain amount of money, it may be competing against people that have more industry experience that want the same amount as you do, and there's a tendency for them to win out in some cases. Not all the time, but in some cases when that's the case. So I wouldn't be so. It depends on what your motivation is for the level you're going in at. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I don't want to be turned down for a job for being, say, overqualified.
It doesn't sound like your experience would be for that. I think you're going to have your difficult challenge, I think, if anything, is going to be, hey, you went to school, you got your PhD in this. Why do you want to be a data scientist? Why do you want to get into data analysis? That's going to be the most difficult hurdle for you. And you have to have a really good answer for them, because if they're going to invest in you, just to think that maybe 6 months from now, you're going to go back into academia, those are the kinds of things that the employer is thinking about before they make that investment in you. So what you have to make very clear is have a good story in terms of why you're making that change.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you want to stay within that specific domain. You could try doing some job searches that include specific libraries on the resume. For example, if a company is looking for someone who has experience with AstroPy, for example, that would definitely limit the number of results that would come back.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a really good point. Unfortunately, we're living in a society that's very keyword centric, and you have to balance that with not overdoing it with the keywords, because anything on your resume is fair game. Putting something on your resume, like I've had people like put things on their resume and ask them what the acronym means, and they're like, you know, if you can't explain what you did with it, don't bother putting it there. Anybody else?
Ari?
Yeah.
My camera keeps turning back off.
It's okay.
How valuable would you say certifications are for Python and other languages?
So I got to tell you, I'm honestly not as familiar with the Python certifications in terms of what their value is. I know that there's different organizations that will give you some type of certificate. Can someone educate me? What's the most respected? Is there an organization that has a respected, industry-wide, well-known Python? I know with Oracle has their Java certifications. AWS has their list of certifications, which frankly do have a meaning for employment. But does Python have a authority per se as it relates to certification program?
Not really. If a technology comes from a company, that company is going to have a certification program. Mm-hmm. But for open source tools, the best thing you can do for certification is showing a lot of experience in it and having good code quality. And the other thing is just how high your reputation is in that community.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can do some tiny things. Like I know LinkedIn added proficiency badges that come from this little quick test. And it's not to show that you have crazy proficiency in something to the level of full certification, but it's just to show, okay, this person is at least verified that they know X, Y, and Z about Python or Ruby when there is no certification process, formal certification process for these things.
Just to build off that, Michael, there's a tool that when I left the recruiting industry that was getting pretty popular, and this might scare you a little bit. It actually knows how to grade your repository coding on a scale of 1 to 5. So I could actually search for candidates that are a 4 and a 5 according to their assessment of their ability to code. So that is pretty scary, because, you have this machine figuring this out and making that label based on certain things. And there's probably there's probably some kind of good scientific code assessment behind it, but there's a lot of things that are changing for sure in relation to that.
There are some Python tools that provide health checks for your Python files. Not necessarily the structure, but just do all of your functions and classes have doc strings, and are you avoiding known vulnerabilities or bad coding practices? And these services usually also have little badges that you could put on your README. If you've seen a Python repository README on GitHub, you've probably seen a little badge that says test coverage or the PyPI version, things like that. It's not quite the same thing, but the higher those percentages are, usually the better indicator of how well supported it is.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's but as far as certifications go, David, I wouldn't want to see people start investing money in certifications. I think I know some people. Actually, one of our developer advocates at JFrog, she's awesome. She gave a Python talk to the San Diego Python group on something they did called Snake on a Car. It's a really cool story. Maybe you'll have her out one day to do that. But she came out of the boot camp system in Seattle, and she's one of those people that came out of something like that very successful. I'd rather see investments made from an education standpoint to gain that hands-on experience. And still, it's challenging once you come out of those to get that first leap before you would just invest in certifications, because I don't know of anything right now that's just the end all to all certifications. I think certification with experience in certain classifications is going to be the most helpful to one's career. But cool.
Okay, we have one more question in the chat.
Okay.
We got 6 minutes left on our time.
Okay, absolutely. Who's that question from? That is, I've been told to keep my resume to 1 page. Yes. How would having a LinkedIn with everything I've done affect decisions? Also, what is your opinion to tailoring your resume for a job? I think tailoring your resume for a job is important as long as it's accurate. And I only say that because there's a stat out there that says 70% of the people lie on their resume in some form. So I think that you should tailor what you can custom tailor it, but if you find yourself rewriting your resume every single time, then there's probably an issue with that. But as it relates to keeping it to 1 page, I do think that's important. Remember, when somebody's reading your resume, especially, let me ask you, Cynthia, how many are you new to the programming world, or have you several years of experience? You're new. Okay. Yeah, your resume should not be more than 1 page. I recommend, really, in most cases, even with a lot of experience, no more than 2 pages, 3 in a real unique situation. But once you start getting into, I know people that have 5 to 10 page resumes, no one's reading that far. They're looking at what you've done most recently, but getting that there and keeping it consistent with your LinkedIn profile is really going to be really going to be your best bet. But also, again, I can be, if anyone has any questions offline, I'm more than happy to do my best to answer that. In the subject, if you email me at rew@jfrog.com, go ahead and just put the Python user group here in Orlando. I will pay special attention and give you the appropriate attention because we met here today. So that's really important. And I'm also going to put the link I just put in the chat. If you want to, we're going to be picking the Nintendo winners across the country next week sometime in the first week of May. So if you want to join the raffle, feel free to enter that as well. But again, I thank you for hearing from me tonight. I really feel welcome here. And I really enjoyed spending time with you all. So thank you.
Well, thank you for giving your talk. I know that recruiting in development circles can be a thorny subject, but always being able to learn about something that many people find very useful and necessary in a lot of cases is always great. And having seeing, we never really hear what it's like and what people are looking for on the other side, and then how to turn around and best navigate that world. So I'm very happy I was recording this one and this talk around, because this is going to be very useful for a lot of people.
Awesome. And again, if anyone has any questions or experiencing a specific circumstance or having difficulty with something, you need to, and just reach out, and I'll do my best to get back to you in a very timely manner. But thank you again.